Good morning, ladies. We are here today with a very, very special guest. Christina is joining us today, and she is an author and speaker, and we are so thankful to have her here with us. She's going to talk today about peace in the waiting. And during this time, we're all doing a lot of waiting, right? And so even when it's not COVID time, there's so many things that happen in our life that just make us sit in that time where, we're wondering, God, do you see me, or are you there, Lord? And there's one of my favorite scriptures from Isaiah, and I will share it with you, ladies, today, is from Isaiah 40:31. And it says, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not grow faint." And it's just such a good reminder that we're waiting on the Lord during that time, and to trust in him, trust that he has this plan for our lives, and he's sovereign. He knows everything, and he's there for us, and he loves us. We're his precious children. So I'm so thankful that Christina is here today. She's the author of I Quit, Facing Cancer with Faith, Family, and Friends, and I'm going to give her the screen and let her roll with it.
Well, thank you. My name is Christina Cotlis, and I live in Manassas with my husband and our 3 children who are 12, 14, and 16. And one of the things that my kids love to do is they, especially right now in this time of extra screen time, they like to get on and listen to entitled parents videos on YouTube or read on Reddit about the entitled parents or entitled Karens or whatever Reddit subsection they happen to get on. Now, if you are an actual Karen, I am so sorry that this thing has happened to your name. But what this basically is referring to is the type of person that demands a manager for satisfaction for everything, or thinks that they're entitled to more than they really are, or demands to get a free meal because they forgot to put a pickle on their hamburger, things like that. So here's an example of an entitled parent's story submitted by a teacher. When I was on hall duty and I sent a child back to walk after he was running and crashed into 3 kids, the mother was nearby and said, "You don't have to go back and walk. We'll practice walking tomorrow." I said, "No, he has to go back and walk right now so he gets the immediate message." She said, "But we're already late." I replied, "Well, if he hadn't been running at lightning speed through the hallway, he wouldn't be going back to walk. It will only take a few seconds each way." She replied, "What is your name so I can report you to the principal?" I told her my name and said that she was free to go tell the principal that her son was running through the hallway and that I made him go back and walk. She turned to her kid and said, "I guess you have to go back and walk. I guess you have to listen to all of the teachers around here, not just your own." Now, hopefully that gave you a little giggle, unless your name is actually Karen, which again, I apologize if that's the case, and I hope that you will give me a chance, even though I started with an entitled Karen story. The thing about most entitled parent stories I've listened to is that these people who demand that their children be allowed to eat off other people's plates because their food isn't out yet, or who want a new Starbucks drink for free because they ordered an hour ago on the mobile app but then never came to pick their drink up and now it's melted. Whatever the case is, the one thing that they're not good at is the same across the board, and it's waiting. The kid in the hall wasn't good at waiting for the next activity or waiting his turn. Some of us are not great at waiting with angry, hangry children who are having a meltdown, and those goldfish crumbs at the bottom of our purse are just not cutting it anymore. Some of us aren't good at waiting for the next item in our schedule so that we can do the things that are time sensitive. These might seem like silly examples, so let's try something a little more serious. How about waiting for a phone call? I mean, we all carry our phones with us everywhere, right? And some of us might even have the watches that are linked to our cell phones so that both our backside and our wrist vibrate with gusto anytime someone's giving us a call. How patient are you when you're waiting for the call that the car is done? Or how about waiting for the call that the car is done and it's 2 p.m. and you were promised it would be done at 10 a.m.? Or this one's very familiar to me. When I was little, my dad's company was bought and sold several times, and there were layoffs constantly. It felt for like a 4-year period that my mom was always waiting for the call on Friday to know if my dad still had a job or not. Those were some tense evenings, and waiting for that phone call was hard. Or maybe like me and many others, you've had to wait for a call about medical test results. Helpful hint, if you are waiting for that, it's good news, because usually if the doctor calls you right away, that's when you're getting bad news. If they wait to call you, there's nothing time sensitive, so nothing to worry about. How about now? How did it feel waiting for May 15th to come, only to have the governor decide that Northern Virginia needs another 2 weeks of timeout, basically? How about waiting to find out if there will be baseball or football or school in a building? Or waiting for there to be an antibody test? Or waiting to see if your job will be there when you're ready to return to work? Or even just waiting for dinner? Waiting is hard. You know, the comforting thing about being Christians, though, is that we know we're not the first ones to wait. Right now, I'm working through the Old Testament prophets with my Bible study friends, and so many of the prophets cry out to God, asking him what, pray tell, is keeping him so busy that he can't fix the things that are wrong for them. One of my favorites is Habakkuk, and he's a pretty minor prophet. I think he only really gets 3 or 4 pages in the Bible, but he has this great conversation with God where he cries out to him. The first part of his book starts off like this. How long, O Lord, must I call for help? But you do not listen. Violence is everywhere, I cry, but you do not come to save. Must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all this misery? Wherever I look, I see destruction and violence. I am surrounded by people who love to argue and fight. The law has become paralyzed, and there is no justice in the courts. The wicked far outnumber the righteous, so that justice has become perverted. Way to go on a rant, buddy. And we know he was waiting for a long time because not only did he go on a rant, but his first chapter of his book is a rant in alphabetical order using the first half of the Hebrew alphabet. So he had some time to put his angry thoughts together. We sound like this sometimes, even if we don't put it in the form of an alphabet poem. Ugh. God, why do you keep letting these bad things happen? Do you see all these awful people? Subtext, do you see me being awesome? I'm so much better than them. So, can you handle this? I feel like I've been waiting a while. Like, are you gonna do this or what? And the thing is, sometimes we let waiting and things not being on our time, in our way, rob us of our joy and our peace in that time where we are waiting. But the good news is we can get it back. The first thing we need to understand is that we can have peace in our waiting when we understand that God is also a waiter too. Going back to some more Old Testament prophets, the prophet Isaiah says, "Yet the Lord longs to be gracious to you. Therefore, he will rise to show you compassion, for the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all those who wait for him." That's Isaiah 30:18. God is having compassion on us while we wait. He's waiting so that he can give us the right things in the right time. Later in verse 40:31, which was already mentioned, but let's talk about it again, he says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." What a great promise. I know that I frequently need to renew my strength in this period of waiting. I do not like the waiting, but God promises me that if I wait for him, he'll renew my strength. When we're waiting for answers and waiting for the next thing to happen, waiting for anything, we have to turn our attention to trusting God in the silent spaces where we're waiting for him to reveal to us what's next. He's having compassion on us as we wait for his timing. He's renewing us as we wait for his timing. Now, I know what you're thinking. Christine, the girl, that's real cute. I like the concept. It doesn't seem very practical. That's fair. Let's take some practical steps, okay? Step 1, focus on right now. Now, you guys, I've done some waiting, and I can tell you there's not much worse than sitting inside of a plastic tube, getting an MRI for 3 hours, held down by your face, and waiting for the scan to finish, knowing that it's bad news. Waiting in that MRI for hours and hours, knowing that the cancer's already back. You're just waiting to see how bad it is. That's some serious waiting. Now, I'm not trying to win the suffering Olympics with you right now. Whatever you're waiting for can feel just as bad as that does. But what I am trying to tell you is that if I can find peace in waiting in that MRI machine, you can find peace in whatever you're going through right now. One thing that really encouraged me throughout both of my cancer diagnoses was Jesus Calling from February 15th. I read it every time I was going for a scan. For a long time, I read it every day along with whatever other day it was. And I'd like to read it to you right now. So if you would, I'd like to invite you to take a deep breath, close your eyes, and just receive these words. Come to me with all your weaknesses, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Rest in the comfort of my presence, remembering that nothing is impossible with me. Pry your mind away from your problems so you can focus your attention on me. Recall that I am able to do immeasurably more than all you can ask or imagine. Instead of trying to direct me to do this and that, seek to attune yourself to what I am already doing. When anxiety attempts to wedge its way into your thoughts, remind yourself that I am your shepherd. The bottom line is that I am taking care of you. Therefore, you needn't be afraid of anything. Rather than trying to maintain control over your life, abandon yourself to my will. Though this may feel frightening, even dangerous, the safest place to be is in my will. I love these beautiful words for so many reasons. Actually, this mindset is what inspired the name of my book, I Quit. I quit because I wasn't going to try and maintain control over my life. I was going to give that to God. I was going to do everything I was capable of doing and then trust Him for the rest. And you can do that while you're waiting too. This passage is an invitation to focus on the present. Stop directing the person who made the universe to do things your way. God doesn't need you to micromanage Him. Focus on what's already happening and how He is daily providing for you and your needs. Step 2, practice makes perfect. When we talk about spiritual discipline, we all know that we're not talking about bad discipline, right? We're not talking about the thing that people do to us when we've done something wrong. But discipline, it comes from the same root word as disciple. It has to do with things we do for ourselves to make us better. We need to discipline our children with love because we want them to be better. We want them to grow into godly people. We practice spiritual discipline for the same reason, so that we can grow into better people and have a closer relationship with God. There are a lot of spiritual disciplines, right? Fasting, prayer, solitude, stewardship, silence, all of these things that are spiritual disciplines. But the one that I like to focus on is the spiritual discipline of joy. Now, you might not think of joy as a spiritual discipline, but it is, because we need to practice using it while we're waiting so that when bad things happen or when longer periods of waiting happen, we have that muscle memory that helps us to exercise our joy when we really need it. I believe joy is a choice, and I believe you can choose joy in all circumstances. Even right now? Yes. Let me tell you a little bit more about my story so that you understand where I'm coming from. In 2013, I had just run the Cherry Blossom 10 miler, which I work into every speech I give because, as you can tell, I'm a little bit fluffy, and I like to tell people that I ran 10 miles. When you tell your story, you can include whatever details you want. Shortly thereafter, our family went on vacation, and I couldn't lie on my stomach to read without my eyes going black, which seems like a strange complaint, but that's what it was. By August, I was having such terrible headaches that I was in the ER thinking I had an aneurysm. I was told that I had migraines and I should man up. Fast forward to January, shortly after New Year's Day, about 5 months after my ER visit, I found myself collapsed on the floor one morning getting my kids ready for hockey. I spent the next week in bed with debilitating head pain, waiting to see a new neurologist because obviously this migraine thing was not working for me. She sent me for an MRI the next week and called me within an hour of the test to let me know that they had found a massive brain tumor in the back of my skull. There's a phrase we use in Christianity, the peace that surpasses understanding, which comes from Philippians 4:7. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. I never understood that phrase until the night I found out that I had a brain tumor. I was upset, and we definitely shed some tears. But I had this supernatural sense of well-being in my soul that told me I could trust God to handle the situation. So, like I mentioned, rather than turning myself into a warrior or a conqueror or, saying I was going to tackle or fight or destroy my cancer, I waved the white flag and I quit. Quitting didn't mean that I gave up my right to experience the emotions of the situation around me. It just meant that I didn't have to worry because worry wasn't going to help me anyway. There's no situation in which your worry keeps the plane up in the air, or in which your worry keeps you alive when you're sick, or in which your worrying puts food on the shelves. Worry doesn't help, and it doesn't change the outcome. I walked into brain surgery smiling because I gave up my future to God. I gave control up to God. I gave up thinking I could heal myself or fix myself or really do anything for myself because that wasn't in my power to do. I would go to the appointments, I would find the right doctors, I would show up and do the treatments, but God would have to carry the burden for me. I would go on to have 16 hours of brain surgery, 6 weeks of radiation, and 18 months of recovery. But during all of that, the most important thing I found was what if faith. And what I mean by that is this. In Daniel 3:17-18, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego are talking to the king. They're getting ready to be sent into the fiery furnace, right? And they say to him, excuse me, if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up. Even if. The golden image, the false idol god that was trying to be set up in my life and probably in your life too when you've been waiting is fear. And sometimes we want to bow down and worship at that idol of fear, of self-doubt. But those are not things God wants in our lives. He's very clear repeatedly that he is a jealous God and we can only serve him. And he tells us to fear not. I had decided my God was going to be able to save me, but even if he did not, I was not going to bow down at that false God and worship at the idol of fear. I posted on Facebook the night before my surgery. I have every intention of waking up tomorrow and working to get better. But if I don't, God will still be God. Even if I am paralyzed, even if I die, God will still be God and he will still be good. So after I had my treatment, we counted our blessings. And then in 2017, 3 years after I finished treatment, God gave me the opportunity to show that I meant what I said about even if he would be good, because my cancer was back. When people told me they believed the cancer just wouldn't come back, we told them, we hope that it won't, but if it does, God will still be God and he will still be good. Unfortunately, where the first time I got sick, we found peace instantly. The second time, I did not. I knew Jesus cried out to God in the Garden of Gethsemane, that he cried until he bled. And he begged God, if there's another way, could we do it that way? But if it's not, your will, not mine, be done. I laid in bed like Hezekiah. I cried out to God for more time, but I had zero expectations of him hearing me because I had done this thing where I took our infinite God and decided that I had used all of the favor that God had for me, all of the grace that God had for me, all of the mercy that God had for me. I had taken our infinite God and given him finite quantities of these attributes. And I don't know why. But I think it has something to do with the fact that as a mom, as a daughter, as a wife, so many times I find myself out of those things, out of patience, out of time, out of energy. And surely I thought God must work the same way. So to overcome that, I had to practice the spiritual discipline of joy. And the first time I was sick, this peace and joy and calm flowed through me, but the second time I was going to have to work for it. So I needed to start with the hard truth that Jesus could have saved himself on the cross, but instead he saved me. The things I thought were finite are not. Grace wins, love wins, mercy wins. The central theme of our Christian faith is that hope rises from death. That means that hope rises from whatever situation you find yourself waiting in. Whatever situation you think is insurmountable, hope rises from that. If I was worth dying for, if you're worth dying for, then I and you are both worth granting peace and whatever else God has for us in his plan, because he's more than able to give gifts abundantly to the point of giving us his own son's life. God has no limits. It's true of my cancer, your marriage, your child's diagnosis, COVID-19, having to homeschool when you didn't want to. Limitless God. Next, I needed to change my mindset. In worship one Sunday, we were singing Spirit of the Living God, which caused me to ugly cry in front of a room full of hundreds of people. Luckily, we go to a very contemporary church, and so whether it's for cost savings or because it looks cool, they keep the lights down really low, and they've got one of those fog machines, so I think that people might have just thought I was choking on the fog. But the important part was that knowing that God was present in the situation and that I could invite him to have his way in my situation and stop seeking bad news and death and pain and start looking for good things. The song tells us that when God comes into our situation, it changes what we see and what we seek. So in your situation while you're waiting, you might be looking for bad news. You might be looking for pain. You might be looking for death. I certainly was with my second cancer diagnosis, but I could stop looking for those things and start looking for other things, including what he was doing. With my new perspective, knowing that I needed to let God do what he was going to do and I need to focus on what he's already doing, I could get through this second diagnosis. I told my children that we were going to realize that the greatest good was God, and that meant every good and perfect gift came from him. We were going to see every glimmer of hope that God gave us. If watching God do what only he could do would change what we see and what we seek, we were going to do the reverse and start seeing and seeking what he was doing right now. So we started this daily practice in the most simple way. Every night before we prayed as a family, I would ask everyone what their blessing was for the day. We practiced seeing God. The kids were much better at it than I was. They would see things like beautiful rainbow in the sky, cloud that looked like a unicorn. They got to go outside and play soccer with dad during the workday. But that was okay. I got better. And starting with joy and gratitude was a lifestyle change in the season we were in, where it would have been so easy to surrender to fear and to doubt and to uncertainty. And they were not invited to our party. I got loud. I became one of those obnoxious people who post the same thing on Facebook every day. And I shared my blessings. Writing stuff down isn't just an obnoxious thing, though. It's something that establishes evidence. When I'm talking to people in person, I like to do a little exercise where I give everyone 2 balloons. I ask them to blow one up empty, and then I ask them to write something that they're grateful for, that God has given them, and to put it inside of the balloon on a little piece of paper. The balloons represent happiness. Happiness isn't really a choice. Happiness is what happens when we see a cute puppy video online or when our kid gives us a hug. We just have that instant swell of positive emotion, right? Then I ask people to pop the balloons. Happiness is fleeting. It goes away. You might see a cute puppy video one minute, and then the next minute there's Dr. Phil on talking about something awful that happened to a child. Happiness goes away. If you didn't write anything down, you're left with just the broken pieces of a balloon. But if you made notes of what God's done for you, you have evidence that things have been good before and they will be again. We have an entire journal that we use to keep track of our blessings. And the reason that's important is because it's a pattern of evidence that even in our worst days, God has blessed us with tiny things, with big things, with casseroles, with friends that gave rides to go play at the park. And because we can see all of those things and remember them on bad days now, while we're waiting to go back outside, while we're waiting to see people again, we can remember that God has been good in the past and he's being good right now. So what I would show you if I was going to pull up my slides, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and give you guys a screenshot of this, is that if adding one more thing, like a joy journal to your life seems like too much right now, if you are overwhelmed and you're like, I like it, but I don't think I really want to go back and add one more thing to our lives, that's okay. I've developed a one-page kind of a, people are really into vision boards now. So it's kind of a vision board for joy, where you give yourself a scripture verse you're going to try and put at the forefront of your mind. It might be a verse that you already had to memorize when you were a child, but it's not something that you're actively putting into practice right now, or it could be a new verse. And the word that you're going to focus on goes at the center. It could be joy, it could be blessed, it could be thankfulness, it could be gratitude, whatever the word is you're going to focus on. And then we put the big thing that God is already doing in our lives. We put the thing that we're really hoping for and that we're trusting God for. We put every little teeny tiny thing that God has given us, that if we went to bed tonight and didn't thank him for and didn't wake up with it in the morning, we would be devastated. Our family, our home, the food on the pantry shelves, every single little thing we can come up with. We also put our prayer list and the thing that we're trusting God for. And that way you can just have that to look at, and it can serve as a reminder that God is holding your concerns in his hand. While you're waiting, he's showing you compassion. So just to wrap up, because you cannot see my PowerPoint notes, those 3 practical things were: step 1, focus on the present. Step 2, practice makes perfect. So we want to practice the spiritual discipline of joy. And step 3, write it down. Write down all of the things that are happening right now that are so fantastic in your life. Now, as a little bonus for finding peace when you wait, sometimes the fear gets really loud, right? Sometimes I would find myself being exhausted because I had spent so much time and energy fighting the fear and fighting the anxiety and fighting the what ifs that I was just emotionally exhausted. So my suggestion for when that happens is this: pull out your handy dandy cell phone. We've always got them, right? And set yourself a timer. I usually did 10 minutes. And what I would do is, when the fear and the anxiety got so overwhelming that I felt like all I was doing was trying to push them out of my head, I would go upstairs and lock myself in the bathroom and set a timer for 10 minutes. And I would have all the negative thoughts. I would take them to their logical or illogical, I guess, conclusion, right? So I'm going to definitely die, and my kids are going to end up like a Disney movie, scrubbing floors with chipmunks singing at them. It's going to be terrible. And I would have all of these awful thoughts that I had been trying to fight off. And I would cry, ugly cry, snot bubbles, the whole thing. And when the timer went off, I would stop. And I would splash some water on my face. And I would tell all of those negative thoughts that I had heard them, that their concerns had been noted, and that I was going to choose to believe in the good things anyway. I was going to choose to believe that I could live. I was going to choose to believe that I would be here for a long time with my children. I was going to choose to believe the positive, equally likely things that could happen. So that's one last way to kind of fight off that anxiety and have peace while you're waiting, is that sometimes you just need to have it out with the fear, and that's okay too. Now, guys, I hope that this has helped you. I hope that it gives you some inspiration for how you can have peace while you're waiting, and whatever you're waiting for. Also, of course, don't forget the tremendous effect that prayer can have. Don't be afraid to ask people to step in and pray for you. And then if there are any questions, or Michelle, if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about, I would be happy to address that before we have to go.
I am just so thankful for you to be here to just share that testimony of how God just helped you through that time period, because I mean, it's amazing. I think we have to get to that place of even if you don't, right? I think that's where God wants to lead us to know that he is good. And I love the way you said it. God will still be God. He will still be good. And I love that he taught you that too during this journey. Like, those are things that sometimes we don't even get to learn those things until we go through horrific trials, right? You know, it's only in those times where you're really walking and relying, you realize how much you have to rely on God.
You really do have to, and the surrender is such a large part of it. And I think that that is tremendously hard for women because we're in control of so many other people's lives, right? Like when people cannot find anything, who do they ask? They ask mom, right?
Right.
And so we are used to being the ones that are so in control. And so having that moment of surrender to God and saying, listen, God, I'll give you everything I've got, which is honestly not a lot. And you are going to have to fill in everything else. And I was listening, there's a football player who came on and said that, who said, I know that even if all I've got is 3%, that God's got me for the rest. And, you know, one of the things I realized, especially in that period where I was recovering from brain surgery, because I could do nothing. I couldn't cook, I couldn't clean, I couldn't even really stay awake long enough to hug my kids. But God filled in everything. It was amazing. So, yeah, that surrender is such a beautiful thing too.
That's so powerful. It's that, and I love how, you know, he's painting this masterpiece, right? Like our lives, like we want to focus on ourselves, but really he's teaching us that he's in charge of it all, right? He's over it all. And he's going to use your story to encourage countless women who are going through the same struggles and trials. And it brings me back to that Proverbs 3:5, which is just trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, you know, in all of your ways, acknowledge him and he will direct your path. And I just love that you chose to focus, God, I'm going to focus on you. I'm going to focus on your gifts of the Spirit. And that's just amazing how he uses that to carry you through the trials and times.
He's so good. And I always like to say it as it's not really my story. I feel like God is telling one story and we're invited into it. And so this is like that I get to have in God's story, but I'm really thankful for the opportunity to get to be a part of what he's doing.
That's so incredibly awesome. Well, Christina, thank you so much for joining us today. We were so blessed by your time with us, and truly, we will continue to pray for you and your family, and thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you guys for having me.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.